Well, folks, thanks for tuning in today. And I'll tell you what, there is so much going on. We're trying to get to you with the news that matters and maybe help you save some time and allow you to, after you listen to the broadcast here, you can get to items that you want to drill down into more deeply. I'll tell you what is going to be all the focus continually this week is what's happening over there in Switzerland, Davos. I have attended there. I've been to those meetings. And it's quite the show, I can tell you. We've got Prime Minister Carney from Canada is going to be speaking today. And of course, the world will be watching tomorrow as President Trump takes the stage. There's going to be a ton of issues being looked at there. But the backdrop to all of this is what's happening in world markets. As we mentioned, we said last week, watch for turmoil in the markets. That has emerged. So if you were watching the show last week, you would have been ahead of people and been able to predict this. And gold continues to go up. It's up around 4,700 an ounce and climbing. You're going to see things continue to move. And again, that is because of little instability in the world as the EU sort of lines up with Greenland, apparently in some kind of a standoff against the US because of President Trump's musing about Greenland and its importance from a geopolitical and defense point of view. So watch that. I said yesterday, I'm saying again today, this is an opportune moment for Greenlanders. President Trump is all about negotiating a deal, and I would say never in Greenland's history have they been in such an enviable position where Greenlanders get together. They can really ask for what they want and probably get it. And that includes whether they're talking to the US about arrangements there, or even whether they're talking to Denmark, because there is the ability for Greenlanders to take a vote on sovereignty association. So keep an eye. Denmark, I think, has a great future. Also, somewhat, really causing turbulence in the markets is the Japan economy and Japan bond market really going in interesting directions. I want to talk about that in a minute, but going back to Prime Minister Carney, as you know, he has been very, very strong in terms of saying he's taking Canada in a much closer direction, cozying up to China in ways that Canada never had before. There's always been some sympathy among Canadians towards things China, but this is very aggressive. And I can tell you that I'm in the United States right now, commentating that I'm hearing here, including at meetings I was at actually just last week at Mar-a-Lago. A lot of concern about what this means to the US security as Canada seems to get closer and closer to China, and even talking about security arrangements with China. China, of course, having probably the worst human rights record of any country in the world in terms of jailing or doing other things to anybody who opposes them. China with a very strong global agenda, and here Canada, and some people see it in the US. I'm hearing from people see it as a risk in terms of giving up Arctic sovereignty if you're letting China start to play around in your own security arrangements. So lots of concern there, not the least of which we're also hearing from religious groups, Christian groups, talking about the increased clampdowns in China on churches. So everything that China most dearly espouses and holds high are things that cause Canadians great concern. Let's see how that works out. But don't despair. The former Prime Minister of Canada is also at Davos. Yes, Justin Trudeau is there with Katy Perry. Not sure what kind of song they'll be singing, but they're getting some interest over there. The other complicating factor, of course, for Prime Minister Carney is that because of the increased government spending in Canada and no sincere projection in terms of getting rid of debt and deficit, inflation, the latest report, inflation going up. Please keep in mind, folks, and this is a nonpartisan statement, goes to any party in power, anytime you see a government in power or people in power, I'm talking municipal, provincial, state, or federal level, and they're announcing increased spending and they're having to use borrowed money to do the increased spending. That's always the single biggest reason for inflation. It's not grocery store people raising the price of bread, though you do have to worry about collusion there. It is government causing your dollar to be diminished in terms of its buying power. as every time you see, and I keep saying this, every time you hear a politician announcing increased spending, and they don't call it spending anymore, they call it investment, if it's being done with borrowed dollars, inflation's going up and your buying power and your pensions are going to be threatened and become worth less. The other thing that is really causing turmoil in Canada, but media don't seem to be talking about it all, that much, and listeners and viewers here will know about the British Columbia Supreme Court ruling on what's called the Cowichan decision, where a First Nations band was granted ownership over about half of the city of Richmond, stating that that particular area was a campground for them way back hundreds of years ago when they were doing their fishing. This is causing problems that mainstream media does not really want to talk about. Nothing is selling in the city of Richmond. You cannot go to the bank and get a second mortgage in the city of Richmond. That's also affecting the larger area. The slowest land sales in the last 2 decades in the Vancouver area. And because there's so many appeals now going on related to this particular ruling, there is uncertainty everywhere. Uncertainty always leads to a drop in investment. You've got the Musqueam band that is opposing the particular ruling because they say that they have claims to the land that the Cowichan band has just been awarded in the BC Supreme Court. You have municipal groups that have filed lawsuits. You've got the provincial government. They say they have filed an appeal, but there's very little action. The federal government has filed an appeal. Landowner groups has filed an appeal. Folks, the threat of this continuing for years is one of the single most debilitating effects on the Canadian economy, and it will continue possibly for years unless governments get together and go to the Supreme Court and demand a special case. This can be done under Canadian law, where these things are brought to a head quickly and moved to the top of the docket, because people are not going to be doing large-scale investments into provinces and into Canada itself when there is so much uncertainty caused by this decision. Watch for inflation to continue to go up. Prime Minister Carney and the Liberals, of course, to try and get away from the harsh economic effects of what is happening, they will be announcing more spending, which means more inflation. Not a good sign. President Trump, in terms of his ratings, one thing that people are saying, well, he's down in the polls. Most presidents are moving into their second year of presidency. He's somewhere in the 40% approval rating. One thing they're not looking on, a key factor that keeps getting overlooked, is that the latest polls show that 92% of the people who voted for Trump in the last election have every intention of voting for him again, or voting for Republicans again. Of course, Trump can't run again. So 92% approval rating among those who voted for him. That should be an encouraging sign to Republicans, as long as they stick to the policies that Trump has been bringing in. Well, somebody who is also weighing out their political future, Sanai Takachi, the prime minister in Japan, and as I predicted when she became leader, she is not going to ever in her life get a good day in media, and that's because she is small c conservative in her thinking and in her worldview. Media hate that. They despise that. Most media are what we call culturally Marxist. They believe in elitist, oppressive, collectivist governments, and anything that doesn't sound like that is going to get, anybody doesn't sound like that is going to get a hard time by media. She is certainly running into it. They don't want her to win the election, which she has called for February 8th. One of the things she's going with is tax cuts. And again, mainstream media and most governments hate the thought of tax cuts, because if a government cannot continue to drain people of their money, the government becomes a little less powerful. And there are a lot of people who are very much concerned about the elitist approaches that are taken by collectivist governments. That's going to cause a real problem, and it's going to be causing problems for her on February 8th. Let's take a look and see how that's actually going to work out. There's a boycott being called for by many people related to the World Cup. And Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. are, of course, hosting the World Cup. the reason the boycott's coming from a number of different groups, there's just a lot of countries who are saying they should boycott it because they don't like President Trump's policies. And the LGBTQ community, very strong. Not sure why, because President Trump, the only issue that he would have there related to LGBTQ issues is he's been very clear that on the issue of transgender, kids should not be undergoing life-changing surgery and pharmaceutical to have their genders changed. And also he's saying there should not be biologically born men. Males should not be allowed to compete against women. That's got a lot of people fired up. But keep in mind, in the 2022 World Cup in Qatar, there were huge boycotts, huge protests that were launched, and yet not at the end of the day, not one country pulled out. They all stayed in. Well, in terms of protest, it goes on, the continuation with the invasion that we saw of the church in St. Paul, Minneapolis. And Don Lemon, as you can remember him before he got punted off of a major network, was seen right in the middle of this protest. It seemed to be that he was almost leading the protesters crashing into a religious service. And he is on record as saying this is a justifiable demonstration of a constitutional right to protest. But that right has never, ever been extended into the places of religious worship. So Don Lemon really getting on the wrong side of that particular issue. And where are all the people who are protesting about invasion of human rights and yet not protesting? Is very significant. I don't care if we're talking about a church or a mosque or a Sikh temple. When you have situations where those are being invaded by protesters, very serious. Let's see how that's going to go. One of the things that's really rocking the sports world right now, there's been an announcement, dozens more NBA members being arrested in terms of illegal betting, this practice of how they can, as it's called, they can shave the points that they make. They can actually adjust what baskets they're going to be successful at scoring. And this is continuing to become an issue. Excuse me, I'm just altering this a little bit. Hope this doesn't bother anybody. Nice shot of the piano there. So a real concern here, but the reports now are very clear that it's more than just in the NBA and the basketball players who've been implicated in huge cheating scandals here. People are reporting, and mental health experts reporting, the addiction factor with sports betting, the fact that it is just increasing hugely. And then there's something that wasn't anticipated. You get players, legitimate NBA players, for instance, getting even death threats if they take a shot and they miss it, or on the football field, they are going for a field goal, and just before they kick, of course, thousands of bets are being processed, and then the poor kicker maybe misses and it goes wide. Even resulting in online threats, even death threats. So it's getting a little crazy out there. Not sure if governments are going to step in and try and get control on that. Well, we talk about a recession. There's also what's being called a vibe session going on now, and that's a recession in the internet market. And when you have major influencers like Linus Sebastian, who has about 16 million people online, he's saying he's seeing things kind of going down in terms of viewership on YouTube. People are switching, especially young people, switching to more to the short video model, and YouTube, which used to be the place to be, somewhat questionable now. We're keeping an eye on that. Mr. Beast himself is saying he has seen his own ratings plateauing with the move to shorts and short videos. Let's see if that continues. Young people, and we're talking about in the 13 to 17-year-old bracket, you might be interested to know, this might be interesting for parents, that on the question of cell phone bans at schools, 41% of young people 13 to 17 years old are actually in support of that. So parents, hang on. If you're getting tough on your kids there, don't let them push back. Now, this is, of course, support at school for bans related to cell phones. It's not outside of that. And by the way, those cell phone bans have about 75% support, understandably, from adults. Well, on the online world, there's a visa application that you can get if you want to move into the United States. It's called the O1 visa, and this is for people of special and rare talent. They can actually get visa application in the United States. That has jumped, the O1 visa applications has jumped 50% over the last 10 years. And again, it's mainly because of influencers, people who are wildly popular, getting their fans groups online are actually, they're able to make the case that they're going to bring, special dollars coming into the U.S., and they have these special talents. So the O1 visas, if you're an influencer and you're online, you want to get into the U.S., you might want to think about that. There's a new way for you there. Thanks for tuning in, folks, and we'll see you tomorrow.